In June 1940, across the flat cotton delta of Sunflower County, a 52-year-old man named Horace carried a leather satchel from door to door, recording the living. He worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, 17 cents per household enumerated. His district, Enumeration Area 7, contained 412 households and 1,240 names. He was good with numbers. He had been counting things his whole life: bales, bushels, heads of livestock, acres of land that other men owned. This was not different, except now the numbers mattered to Washington. The Form P-12 was one page, front and back. Pre-printed columns for name, age, race, relationship, occupation, address. Horace filled in 1,240 of them over 9 days in June heat that sat at 94 degrees by 8 in the morning. The paper smelled of sizing and fresh ink, and by the third day of his sweat. He sat at kitchen tables, on porch steps, on the open tailgate of a mule cart. He wrote everything exactly as he saw it. He did not omit. He did not interpret. The trouble was on page 37. He noticed it while collating his forms by lamplight the night before delivery. Past midnight, the kitchen clock reading 12:44. He turned the page over, then back, then held it at an angle under the lamp. A column he had filled in, household address, carried a small annotation in a different hand. 2 characters. E7. He turned to the next page. E7. He spread all 37 pages across the table. The annotation appeared on 29 of them. Every single one corresponded to a black household. He knew exactly what E7 was. Section 4, subsection C of the Enumerator Manual. Dwellings of unrecognized habitation. He had read the manual twice before his first day. An E7 annotation removed the dwelling, and every person in it, from the official population tally. He counted the affected entries: 112 households, 431 people, struck from record in handwriting that was not his own. Someone had gone through his forms after he submitted them for review. Someone with access to the county building, the patience to work through 29 pages, and precise knowledge of which 2-character code would make 431 people administratively cease to exist, without altering a single name, changing a single date, or leaving a mark visible to anyone who didn't know what E7 meant. Horace was not a union man. He was not a protest man. He had watched 2 men from his church disappear in 1931 for reasons nobody spoke about directly, and he understood, without being told, how survival worked in Sunflower County. The lamp burned low. The cotton fields outside made no sound at all. He sat with those 29 pages for a long time. Then he pulled a fresh stack of blank P-12 forms from his satchel. He always carried spares. Standard procedure. He uncapped his pen. He started rewriting. He would work until the sky went gray, reconstructing 112 forms from memory, and he would deliver them not to the county clerk's office in Indianola, where someone with access had already proved what they were willing to do, but to the federal field office in Jackson, 61 miles south. What Horace could not know, at 12:44 in the morning with his lamp burning and his pen moving, was that the E7 annotations had not stopped at District 7. They ran across all 14 enumeration districts in the county, 1,240 names, and the man who had written them was, at that hour, in Jackson, waiting at the field office. He left Sunflower County at 3:47 in the morning, 61 miles to Jackson on Highway 49, in a 1934 Ford pickup that ran hot above 50 and pulled left on wet pavement. The satchel sat on the passenger seat. He had packed 2 stacks, the originals with the E7 annotations and the rewritten forms, rubber-banded separately, still warm from the pen. The air smelled of torn soil and fertilizer plant runoff from outside Yazoo City. He drove with the window down. He didn't use the headlights through Belzoni. Old habit. The federal building in Jackson opened at 8. Horace arrived at 7:22 and sat in the truck for 38 minutes, watching the entrance. A man in a tan suit went in at 7:41 with a briefcase and a cup of coffee before the door was officially unlocked. He wore the small blue rectangle on his lapel that Census Bureau field supervisors wore during the 1940 collection season. Washington man. Horace had seen the type at the district briefing in April. They all moved the same way, like the building already belonged to them. He went in at 7:59 and walked to the second-floor field office with his satchel under one arm. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old cigarette smoke. A woman at the front desk looked at him the way women at front desks looked at him. The brief recalculation, the fractional delay. He told her he had corrected forms for District 7, Sunflower County. She picked up the telephone receiver before he finished the sentence. The man in the tan suit came out 2 minutes later. His name was Walter Greer, Senior Field Supervisor, Census Bureau, Washington, D.C. 38 years old, clean-shaved, mechanical pencil behind his ear, a folded telegram visible in his breast pocket. He knew Horace's name before Horace said it. A telegram had arrived at 6:15 that morning from the Sunflower County Clerk's office, reporting that enumerator Tillman had submitted forms containing significant numerical irregularities, that he was uncooperative, confused, possibly unwell. The telegram had reached Greer before Horace's truck cleared the Yazoo City limits. Greer placed both form stacks on the table between them and sat down without offering a chair. He compared the originals to the rewrites in silence for 4 minutes. He circled 3 reference points with his pencil. Then he set it down. He looked at Horace the way a man looks when 2 contradictory things are both obviously true. The E7 annotations were in a different hand, visible to anyone who checked. A formal handwriting analysis would confirm it in 48 hours. Greer already knew this. What he said instead was, "When did you last speak to the county clerk?" Years later, in 1974, a graduate student from Howard University named Patricia Cross was working through civil rights-era census discrepancy files at the National Archives in Washington when she found Walter Greer's intake report from that morning. It was thorough. It documented the E7 annotations, the handwriting discrepancy, and Horace's account in full. It recommended formal review of all 14 enumeration districts in Sunflower County. It was signed, filed, and stamped. Reviewed, no action warranted. W. Greer, Senior Supervisor, July 2nd, 1940, 4 days after he wrote it. Patricia stared at that stamp for a long time. Then she turned to the document filed directly behind the report. It was a letter from a Mississippi congressman, dated June 30th. 3 lines. No salutation. She almost put it back. The congressman's letter was 3 lines addressed to the director of the Census Bureau in Washington, D.C. It did not mention Horace by name. It did not mention E7 by code. It referred in careful language to the ongoing difficulty of accurate enumeration in rural Mississippi counties and the importance of experienced local personnel in resolving field discrepancies. The signature belonged to a man who had served on the House Appropriations Committee since 1931, the same committee that controlled the Census Bureau's annual operating budget. Walter Greer received the letter the same afternoon he interviewed Horace. He read it twice, folded it back into his breast pocket. Then he filed his intake report. 4 days later, he stamped it. No action warranted. Horace's enumerator contract was terminated on July 5th, 7 days after Jackson. The termination notice cited completion of district workload, standard language. His final payment was $3.12, covering 4 days of pre-approved work. He signed for it at the post office in Indianola without contesting the termination. He did not write to Washington. He did not speak to a lawyer. He went back to what he'd been doing before June, counting inventory for a dry goods store on Highway 49, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 42 cents an hour. That is the last official record of Horace B. Tillman. Patricia Cross had not been looking for Horace in 1974. She had been tracing systematic undercounts in southern states during the 1940 enumeration, the research thread that would become her doctoral dissertation at Howard University. She had been in the National Archives for 11 days. She had read 467 field documents. The Greer intake report stopped her. She read it twice, then pulled every adjacent document filed within the same 10-day window from Sunflower County and spread them across her table. Here is what she found. The corrected forms existed, not in the county record, not in the Mississippi State file. In a sub-record group labeled Field Resolution Documents, Disputed Submissions 1940, filed under an administrative classification that bypassed the state office entirely. 112 corrected household forms, 431 names, each one stamped with a single date, July 1st, 1940. Filed, W. Greer. 1 day before the no action stamp on his own report. Greer had filed them anyway. It wasn't heroism, it was procedure. Once the discrepancy existed in a written document, the corrected forms became part of the evidentiary record, and closing the investigation did not retroactively erase documentation that was already filed. Nobody had ordered Greer to destroy the forms. Nobody had thought to. The E7 annotations had come from a county building in Indianola, and whoever made them had assumed the paperwork would vanish the way things vanished in Mississippi in 1940. They hadn't counted on a man who drove 61 miles before sunrise. They hadn't counted on a federal supervisor who understood the procedure has consequences no congressman's letter can fully reach. Patricia found the last document at 7:43 in the evening, 40 minutes after the reading room officially closed. It was not a census form, not a government document at all. A single sheet of plain paper, no letterhead, no stamp, folded in thirds and tucked beneath the final rubber band in the stack. The handwriting was careful, disciplined. The handwriting of a man who had spent his life making numbers accurate. It was addressed to no one. It read, "The originals are not the only copies. There is a third set. It is not in this building." The filing date on the outer folder read, July 1st, 1940. The same afternoon, Greer filed the corrected forms, which meant Horace had been in this building, this file room, this specific sub-record group, on July 1st. After Greer had told him the investigation was closed, after he was supposed to have gone home to Indianola, after he had signed for $3.12 at a post office window and disappeared from every official record that followed, he had come back. Patricia read the note 4 times before she moved. The reading room was empty. The overhead lights had gone to half power at 7:30, the archive's way of asking you to leave, and she sat in that dimmed room with a single sheet of plain paper in her cotton gloves and tried to construct the chronology. July 1st, 1940. Greer files the corrected forms at some point during business hours. The note appears in the same folder, which meant Horace arrived at the federal building in Jackson on July 1st. After the investigation was officially closed, after his contract was terminated, after he had no formal standing to enter a federal file room at all. He had walked back in anyway. He had placed a note in a folder he was not supposed to know existed, and then he had left. Nobody had stopped him. Nobody had recorded his presence. The building had no visitor log for colored visitors in 1940. She started with the postal records. 2 days in the National Archives microfilm room, running July 1940 postal money order registers for Sunflower County, Mississippi, cross-referencing by surname, then by district, then by address. Nothing for Tillman in Indianola. On the 3rd day, she expanded to Yazoo City. Nothing. On the 4th day, she tried the Jackson Central Post Office register. On July 2nd, 1940, at 11:44 in the morning, a money order for 63 cents was purchased by an H. Tillman, listed as paying for a parcel, 3rd-class mail, weighing 1 pound and 4 ounces. Destination: 3435 Indiana Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. The address of the Chicago Defender. The Defender had been running the Great Migration north for 30 years by 1940. It moved through Mississippi in coded networks, passed hand-to-hand on the Illinois Central train, folded inside laundry, tucked beneath floorboards. It was the most widely read black newspaper in America. It was also, in its offices on Indiana Avenue, one of the few institutions in the country that a black man from Sunflower County could mail something irreplaceable and reasonably expected not to disappear. Horace knew this. A man who read a federal enumerator manual twice before his first day of work did not choose an address carelessly. Patricia flew to Chicago on a Thursday in November 1974 on a research grant of $400. The Defender Archive occupied the 3rd floor of their Indiana Avenue building. 700 linear feet of filing cabinets, bound ledgers, and correspondence boxes, organized by year and subject. She told the archivist she was looking for any 1940 correspondence related to Mississippi census data. The archivist was gone for 11 minutes. He came back carrying a cardboard box with a strip of masking tape on the lid. Written on the tape in faded black marker, Mississippi/census/1940/unverified. Do not publish. Inside the box were 112 census forms, the corrected ones, every name Horace had rewritten from memory the night of June 27th. Paperclipped to the top form was a letter in Horace's handwriting. 2 pages, precise and unhurried, describing the E7 annotations, the county clerk's office, the trip to Jackson, Walter Greer, and the congressman's letter, whose contents Horace had apparently been able to estimate accurately enough based on Greer's behavior after reading it. The defender had never run the story. A note in the margin of the letter, in different handwriting, read, "Editor, need corroboration from federal source before print. Filed pending." The corroboration had never come. The box had sat there for 34 years. Patricia lifted the last form from the bottom of the stack. Beneath it, loose, unpaper-clipped, as if placed there as an afterthought, was a second letter, also in Horace's hand, shorter, dated July 1st, 1940, the same date as the note in the National Archives. She read it once. Then she set it flat on the table and did not move for a moment, because the letter did not describe Sunflower County. It described 11 other counties, 7 other states. It listed in 2 columns a set of census district numbers and a set of population figures, original and corrected, that Horace had not collected himself. He had gotten them from somewhere else, from someone else, someone who had seen the same E7 system operating far beyond Mississippi, had been tracking it, and had known Horace was coming to Jackson before Horace had decided to go. The letter ended with a name. One name. No address. Patricia had never heard it before.